If everybody can please find their seats, we'll start the program in 2 minutes. Please take something to eat and find your seats. The program is about to begin. Good evening and welcome to the marking of the Shloshim of our dear Father. We come together to remember and v'achayitin el liboy, more importantly, to learn lessons from the life, the legacy, the inspiration that was inspired by our dear father, Rabbi Moshe Yehuda ben Rav Tzvi Yosef, Hareini Kaparas Mishkavai. As we noticed the day of his Shloshim, the actual Shloshim, even though with Shavuos there wasn't a Shloshim, so we were able to do it in the Yomim HaSmuchim. Being in the 24 hours, the Yemei HaChana of the Yom HaNoira Gimel Tammuz, the family came to realize that as our father encapsulated his entire life in a few short words, Shaf kol yamav ligraim nachas ruach likveit kedushas adeineinu marenu v'rabenu ulevaser toivu b'hoisafa. Everything in his life was for the purpose to give nachas, to give joy to our Rebbe, and to be able to report and give over good news, more good news, additional good news, as the Rebbe wrote to him many times in answers to the hundreds of duchs and letters. Garam nachas ruach, ken yevaser toiv, la'asad lavai, ken yevaser toiv u'bai safa. This became his motto. And therefore we felt it very appropriate for chassidim, for family, for shluchim that are coming together in the days that lead up to Gimel Tammuz, which is a time when we reflect on our iskashrus to the Rebbe and to the lives that we live, to use this opportunity and to glean lessons and inspiration from our dear father's life to help us become better chassidim, better people, and to be able to give the Rebbe more nachas. My father would tell the story often of a chassid that came to his Rebbe and requested that he had the yearning desire to experience the revelation of Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet. And his Rebbe told him that if you're really serious, I'll give you a proper preparation through which, if you follow my directions, you'll be able to experience this great revelation of Eliyahu Hanavi. And so for 90 days, he woke up early and went to the mikveh. He davened, he fasted, he was nice to people, he studied extra, he did everything to the prescription of his great Rebbe. At the end of 90 days, it was right before Rosh Hashanah, and he comes to the Rebbe and he said, I followed every single to the letter of the law. Now tell me where am I going to experience this great Gilui Eliyahu? He said, I want you to go to the store, fill up a wagon load of food. You're going to go to the third mountain of the Carpathian Mountains, and at the top of that third mountain, there is a little hut. Over there, you'll knock on the door, and you will experience this reward. And he followed the orders, he filled up the wagon, took food, went up, comes to the top of the mountain, he takes a shofar with him, he knocks on the door, and the door opens, and there's a battered lady with 7 little kids in ripped, torn clothing, standing, looking in bewilderment. It's 2 hours before Rosh Hashanah, one of the greatest days of the year. What are you doing here? And he said, well, I came to experience a great experience. Can I stay here with you? He said, well, yeah, you can stay here with us, but we have no food. He goes, no worries about food. I have all the food that you can use. But we don't have any religious items. We're not near a community. He goes, I have a shofar. And he spends the next 2 days over there deep in prayer, waiting for this moment, and the moment never comes. Disappointed, he goes back down after the high holidays, comes back to his Rebbe with complaints. How could you do this to me? And the Rebbe said, I promise you, follow the same prescription, fill up your wagon load, up to the third mountain for Yom Kippur, and I promise you, you have my word, you will meet Elijah the prophet. And he follows the orders, comes up the mountain, knocks on the door, and he comes to the door, he's about to knock on the door, and all of a sudden he hears from behind the door the sound of little children crying, Mama, Mama, it's 3 days we didn't eat. It's 3 days. What are we going to do? He says, don't worry, my dear children. God Almighty sent us Elijah the prophet for Rosh Hashanah. I'm sure he'll take care of us for Yom Kippur. The message of this story, besides for just being a nice life lesson, is, I think on some level, this encapsulates a large part of our dear Father and the message that he would want us to take home. Every ordinary person who connects and follows the Rebbe's prescription selflessly and is there for other people can be Eliyahu Hanavi. And this, when we look around the world and the magnitude of shluchim, of people that had personal relationships that were impacted by our dear Father's generosity, commitment, inspiration, shows us the life that he lived was in parallel, and he has been the Eliyahu Hanavi for so many. As we start tonight's event, we will start with prayer, with a tefillah for each and every one of us and our families to be healthy and well, to be inspired, to be connected, the iskashrus, to our Rebbe, for all anash, shluchim, and I would like to take a moment over here. Nistaris Darkei Hashem. Hashem acts in wondrous ways. My older brother and sister-in-law this morning lost her dear father, my father's mechutin, who he was very close with, Yeshua Elchanan ben Yosef Mordechai. And I would like to ask my nephew, Menachem Mendel Kotlarsky, to come and say the first kapitel Tehillim, the Rebbe's kapitel, in memory of his grandfather and for the well-being of all Anash and Chasidim. You can follow on the screens.
Shir Hamale Selach Anasasi Seinaya Yeshim Bashamayim. Hine Kini Avodim Al Yad Adinenu Adinem Kini Shifchal Yad Givsa Kini Nenu Adinoi Elihenu Achichanenu Chanenu Adonai Chanenu ki Rav Savanu Buz Ravel Savalano Hanafshenu Halagashananam Habuz Legeyonim.
I'd like to ask my dear uncle, Rabbi Mendel Kotlarsky, who worked side by side for so many years with my father, to please come up and say my father's kapitel to Hillel.
Lam natzayach min ginis mizmer lasav shir. Naida b'Yehudalim Yisrael kod el shemai. Vayhi b'shalom yisukei u'minasei v'tziyain. Shama shibarish b'koshas v'agim b'cherem u'chom masala. Nair atar adir marei taraf. Ashtelu abir leiv nam shnasom leimatzuchan sheichayil yedeyem. Megaros chale Yaakov nir damerech v'sus atar nir atar umiyam id lefanecha meyazapecha. Mishemayim mishmata din eretz yar v'shekata. Mikum la mishmat alihim leishia kalan ve'eretz salah. Ki chamas adam tedecha sheres chaim meistage nid v'samlan eleichem kol svivav yevasai lameira yiv tzeiruach nigidem neir alamalchi aretz.
One last kapitel, we're going to ask a dear friend to represent the supporters who enabled all of our work to come and say a kapitel Tehillim for our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael, for the captives, may they be released, and for the well-being and all of us to be able to march to the Geula with Mashiach speedily. Rebbe Leo Kolodenko from Toronto, Canada. Kapitel Chaf.
Lam natzech mizmor David, yan charanai biyom tzara, yizagevcha shem Elohe Yaakov, yishla izrecha mikodesh, umitzion izadecha, yizkor kol menuchasecha, yolascha yidash nesela, yiten lecha lelevavecha, v'chol atzascha yamale, naranana b'shuasecha b'shem nagdil, yemaler kol mishulosecha, ata yadati ki hoshiaranai, Meshichoi v'yaneu mishmei kachok v'rosh Hashem yaminoi. Ela v'veref v'el sima nachtum b'shem anai Elohim naskir hayim akaram nafalav nachtum kamnu hamnisadat nashmach yaneinu v'yem kareinu.
As a child growing up near the Rebbe, my father would always mention that he was one of the few families that lived actually in Crown Heights. He always would make a point never to miss a moment that he had a chance to be able to see the Rebbe. Made it a point to be by Avi Farbrengen. And even when the Rebbe gave him the Hira to go to Montreal, to learn in Montreal, he received reshus for every single Shabbos Mevarchim, to be able to make it to every single Farbrengen. And he never missed the Farbrengen even when he was away in yeshiva. When he began to work for the Rebbe for Merkez Liyanei Chinuch, and the Rebbe began to give him responsibilities and achrayus to care for Yidden throughout the world, starting off in South America. He would take 3-week trips. Growing up, he would be away twice a year, usually, for 3 weeks straight. Other times, he always started off on Sunday, and he tried to be back for the Shabbos Farbrengen. But on the long weeks, he would try to make sure that he was back again for the Shabbos Mevarchim Farbrengen. In the later years when the Rebbe began to Farbrengen every single Shabbos, he infused within us as children to never miss or try not to miss a Farbrengen even when he wasn't there. He shared with us that in the last years, Nun Aleph, Nun Beis, whenever he was present at a Farbrengen, the Rebbe would turn around to him. The Rebbe would make the motion to him that he should say L'chaim on a full cup of wine. And then the Rebbe would continue saying L'chaim to others, and he would look and turn around to see my father finish the cup. He said he felt that that was what was giving him the chayas for the years to come. Before going to a kinnis, he would ask, is there anything that I'm meant to say? He would ask Rabbi Chadikov, he would write into the Rebbe as well, if there's any special things he's supposed to say. And multiple times the Rebbe said, Kefisha meduber b'svadus b'Shabbos, as it was mentioned on the Farbrengen of Shabbos. Every time he had a meeting, and every event, he was makbet to be Peseach b'dvar malchus, that the first thing that starts the event is a word from the Rebbe. So we're going to begin tonight with a video of a Farbrengen from Chof of Tavshem Memdaled. The Rebbe talks about the union of Ashliach.
Was ich der Monte des Wadrische Liefnisse, wenn geht zu dem Kenntnis von der Shloshim, bei Eretz HaKodesh, und bejachad im See, ich mit Zadig, wenn die Shloshim, was gefunden sich, wie Schara Rotzes, was da sehr Rätschungen nach Reinen Bichlal wegen 3 Pfannen, die Muskor echt frier und die Muskor nach Reinen, dass der Schlichus der Gericht mehr nicht, nimmt mehr nicht dem Kirch, der Siehe, oder noch mehr die Kirche am meisten, oder mit dem ganzen Schliach, als wird der Mischaleach, und dann noch dort der Chidush, Alpiteres, Achsidus, wie verstandig bekam am Kemis, als dort der Kaf Shalei, der Messias von dem Schliach. Und das nicht gestiele, zum Messias am Schaleach, wie bald am sagt, nachher zurück lefone, schau Marti ve Nasser Rizeni, darf sich sein, schau Nasser Rizeni, darf sein an Nasser, Benele darf sein an Nese, was nicht bleibt der Rotzen allein und der Baller Rotzen, dass dort der Baller Rotzen ist geworden am Marti, und dann noch hat sich durchgeführt, wenn Nasser Rizeni, durch den Zweiten, wo der Zweite wird noch beloschen Harava Magi. Stech hat Zeitris Kesser, dass nicht der Zweite, nur dass der Zweite Halb. Stech hat Zoi Zuris. Und sie wird zusammen ein und eins gesagt, wie der Mond friert, wo Hoyo le Bosse Reche. Und das ist echt eine Gehe zu jeder Schliach, also kann sich achten, als sich übergeben, im Ganzen zum Mischalech, zu Nesid der Reine, zum Remden Schwer. Wenn Meli wurde verhorven, wird sich gehen und wird tun, wie geholte, wie weiß sich ist, und danach wird es schwer Maschlim sein, warum geht sich als ein Schliach gemäßig. Sagt man ihm, als darf sein, der Messias von Schliach. Taken werden nicht wie Kafschelei, und Tische kamen mich al Chavele, in den Minien als Schlichus, und befragt noch ein Schlimmes als Schlichus. Aber der Schlich ist im ganzen Messias am Schaleach, ist auch eine sichere Sache, dass es steht, als so ein Zures. Bejachad im See, darf aber sein, der ganze Sturm, mit seinem Tag, in Kafschele, darf sein, der ganze Sturm, wie sie tut, ab Bosser Vadam, mit Ramach Hevim, ושעשה גיד עם גשמים, בגשמיס ובסי, in אילם הזה התחתן, שאין תחתן למטה ממנו, in דסי הגשמיס וגם בסי הרוחני. Bekommst es in ganzen Kistirene, also in ganzen Messias am Schalech, Adrade, und das will der Schalech, und das wird der Teilung von Schalech, wie der Rebbe Marashi Mevar Barucho, wie schade der Schaliach tut mit den ganzen Sturm als am Messias Farsi. Wie Zwanit das macht, für am Messias Amitis. Und heisst was Azafal Pi, wo dem Teil von Schliech und dem Maschke mit der alle Schliches in der Rede, rät mir sich zu mehr nicht wie zu einem Teil von den Jiden, was gefunden sich da. Der Dämischlamitose dürfen alle wissen sein, dass jeder von uns, mit der klar ist wohl, seine Schluchen von der Siederreine von Rebbe schwer. Und das ist eine Sache, was das auch getan hat. Einmal ist es sehr geblieben, bin ich bedürftig, wie beschaß mir wird, einmal ein Jide, der noch lohnt und lohnt.
If all those in the back, there are seats up front, please. I'm just reminded, amongst the many letters and shlichusim that my father was sent on, the Rebbe had empowered him and had sent him many times to different places that were having issues. And on one such report that he wrote to the Rebbe, 3 pages in, on the bottom, next to my father's name, the Rebbe wrote a paragraph. Kavanas Nisi Yosef Shel, and he circled Moshe Yehuda ben Golda, Hishela Anyonim Shalasar Liis Kidaboi Veloisha Starech Lichtov Michtavim Vidafka Ani. That the purpose, the intention of the travels of my father was that things in each place should be taken care of appropriately, and not that the Rebbe should have to write letters. This was people who were trying to get the Rebbe involved, and this was in 1990, 1991. But amongst my father's many travels, and in one of the areas of the world that he took tremendous pride in watching the Azarim Bedima Berinig Yitzayru, watching the investment that the Rabbeim made in what was called the former Soviet Union at the time. One by one, place by place, shluchim were sent out to places where Yiddishkeit was completely driven underground and tried to be annihilated or eradicated. And yet the Rebbe, through his army, through his shluchim, in each of these places, especially in the early years, it wasn't an easy travel. Going through the pictures, seeing a young father together with young shluchim, and watching schools being built, flowers being brought to plains as they welcomed them into town, and the rebirth of Jewish life in what was called the former Soviet Union was a very, very large part of my father's time and attention for the better part of the last 30 plus years, 35 years that I remember growing up. And therefore it gives me great honor and privilege to call on the head shliach, the chief rabbi of Russia, someone who worked hand in hand over all these years. And I want to just take a moment now and wish and give a bracha, the koyach of everybody here. And my father committed to be a Meilitz Yosher, so up there he should do his part, that the shluchim in all of those countries should have it well, begashmius. They should be able to continue to do their job in growing Yiddishkeit, seeing success, together with all of the shluchim all over the world, in every area of Bane Chayu Mezoina, but specifically the freedom and ability to be able to continue to do their work and work b'Shavas Achem, Mishas Riyeu, Yazayru, all shluchim across the board. Please give your undivided attention to dear friend Rabbi Beryl Lazar.
A guten Chodesh. I'm sure that Rabbi Kotlarsky, in a certain way, is not too happy that we're all standing here, sitting here, talking about him, making a fuss about his success, his Übergegebenkeit, his dedication to the Shluchim, to the children of the Shluchim. But on the other hand, we all know that Rabbi Kotlarsky was very organized. So even this, he managed to arrange it that Erev Gimel Tammuz, we should be able to speak about the Rebbe through the prisma of Rabbi Kotlarsky. So I think this evening, being the Shloshim, is also an evening of Achona, preparation to Gimel Tammuz. So I'll try to share with you very few anecdotes in my relationship, interaction with Rabbi Kotlarsky. One of the statements that I heard only from him, but I heard it many times, was an interesting observation that he had on the way the Rebbe worked. He kept on telling me, the Rebbe gives a job to a chassid, to a shliach, to a Jew. If the job will be done, and will be done well, without complaining, with a smile, he'll give him another job. He'll give him a new opportunity to do even more. When that is going to be done, you succeeded, you did it, you invested, you're going to get another job. More you'll do, more the Rebbe is going to give you new opportunities. And when he was telling me these stories, I always used to think, oh, it's like a soccer game. If you're a player and they pass you the ball, the captain, so you can do two things. You can say, I'm tired, not this moment. Why did he choose me? Why is he giving me such a hard task? Why am I supposed to be the one to shoot the goal? You all know right now it's the European Championship. So as an Italian, that's what we're thinking about. And if you take the ball and you make sure you invest everything you can, you're going to get another chance, another chance. And that was probably the way Rabbi Kotlarsky saw his own zchus that he had, that the Rebbe kept on giving him new missions, new responsibilities, and new projects. But the uniqueness was that he did it with a smile. And he knew that it's not about his glory. His success was actually, as we just heard, was the Meshaleach, was the Rebbe who sent him. I heard a story and actually checked it to make sure that it's actual. The once Rabbi Chadakov called in a shliach and he told him, we're seeing, Baruch Hashem, your success. You're having incredible results in your work. We see how many institutions, people you're attracting, what you have built. And we thought that it's time maybe to give you a new area, a new geographic area where you will be responsible of. And he mentioned which area. The shliach was taken aback and he said, Rabbi Chadakov, I know my capabilities, I know what I can handle. This is a little too much. I have so much on my head to be added this new responsibility. It's already over my capabilities. Rabbi Chadakov became very serious and he turned to the shliach and he says, you mean to say that the success you had till now was because of your capabilities? The shliach realized the big mistake that he made and he said, I'm sorry. I'm ready to take it. I understand it's all the Rebbe. I'm ready to do it. I'm ready to undertake this new geographical area. I'll try to do whatever I can. And Rabbi Chadakov tells him, it's too late. You missed the opportunity. Rabbi Kotlarsky kept on saying, and I heard this in the last conversation I had with him a week before, sadly, he was niftar. He said, it's not about me. It's about the Rebbe. It's fully about the Rebbe. It has nothing to do with me. But what he did succeed in an incredible way, something that many shluchim, many of us forget, is to give the Rebbe a report, detailed report of everything that he saw and that was going on. And I think one of those highlights of his life was when the Rebbe on Hoshana Rabbah Tovshinun Beis, in the middle of a Sikha, the Rebbe started speaking about the city of Lubavitch. And the Rebbe says, the city where Tomchei Tmimim was established, where the yeshiva started, today has been visited by Shloshim who went to that place, learned Chassidus, Farbrengt, took on themselves new achlotes, did Torah and mitzvahs in this place, and had such an effect that the people that were there were so uplifted by what they saw that they gave a report, and the report was with so much chayus, with so much energy, that had an effect on those that received the report, in a way that v'nocha olav ruach Hashem, that the Rebbe should say such words about a duch that was written, about a visit in Lubavitch. For Rabbi Kotlarsky, this was one of the highest points. He kept on repeating, do you remember the Sikha of Hoshana Rabbah? What was the report? The report was the quite famous first Kinus HaShluchim that took place in the Soviet Union in 1991. Shluchim from all over Europe came to Russia. They visited Lubavitch, Moscow, Almaty. There are many stories from this Kinus. One of the incredible miracles of the Rebbe asked that in Almaty they should daven and Chofav, Ma'ariv, Shachris, and Mincha, and even though everything was tried, that the charter plane should stay and wait till we'll daven Mincha, it turned out impossible. And all of a sudden, we were already on the runway, and a huge sandstorm right in front of the plane started hitting the plane, and the captain had no choice to turn back to the tarmac. Everybody got off. We daven Mincha. The minute that the last Kaddish was over, they announced that we can go back on the plane. This was one of the many miracles that we saw then, how the Rebbe was really involved in every detail of the Kinus. But Rabbi Kotlarsky knew that he should give a report. The first report he gave to the Rebbe was how the Shluchim were greeted in the airport. That on the loudspeakers of the Moscow airport, there was an announcement, Brukim, I'm repeating Rabbi Kotlarsky's, I'm trying to. Brukim abaim shluchei. And of course, this Russian person that was reading the text couldn't really understand what was going on. And Rabbi Kotlarsky knew very well how to repeat him. But it made such an effect on him that he wrote to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe mentioned this moment at a Farbrengen. Later, and this I heard from himself, he gave a report on the phone to Rabbi Chadakov right after Shabbos of what happened on Shabbos in Moscow. And he was telling Rabbi Chadakov that 120 shluchim walked from the hotel to the Marina Rosh synagogue with taleisim, and there was a police escort. In the city of Moscow, on the main road, 120 shluchim walking with taleisim, and there was a police escort. The police, they once used to arrest chassidim, they were actually escorting the chassidim to the shul. And all of a sudden he heard the Rebbe's voice, Azegor, Azegor. Twice he heard the Rebbe saying, that far? This is really what happened? I wish I would know how to translate Azegor in English. And later he was zeiche that his report, which was given with so much vitality and so much enthusiasm, brought nachas ruach to the Rebbe. The Rebbe said, "V'nocha olav ruach Hashem," that the people that heard the report, they were uplifted higher than time and space. In other words, as if they were there in Lubavitch. So I think, looking back at my relationship with Rabbi Kotlarsky, no question that he infused in each one of us, the shluchim, the schus that we have. Forget about difficulties. Don't think about them. Of course, he tried to help each one of the shluchim to make his life better, easier. But the most important thing was making each one of us understand the schus that we have to be a shliach of the Rebbe. That we're able to bring nachas ruach to the Rebbe. And interesting enough, when this kinnus was being organized, the Rebbe practically handpicked each one of the people that participated in the kinnus. The Rebbe said they should invite also the Shluchim from Morocco. The Rebbe said that Zalman Jaffe from England should get a special invitation. Some Shluchim, yes, some not. But interesting enough, the one that was representing the Rebbe at the kinnus, many different people asked to come. I won't get into the whole history, but the one that was picked to represent the Rebbe and to be the one in charge of the kinnus was actually Rabbi Kotlarsky. And I think this is a strong message. Again, the Rebbe trusted him because he proved that he's doing it as a shliach of the Rebbe, one with the Meshaleach. And I think that every year by the kinnus, we felt it, we saw it. I want to wish that Amir Hashem, we should continue seeing his brachas, his tefillas, that the shluchim should be able to continue celebrating the kinnus HaShluchim, thinking about him, remembering him, and taking from him a lot of kayach to continue our shlichus with a smile, and thanking the Rebbe for the biggest present that we got, and letting the Rebbe know of Baruch Hashem, the success that we see, thanks to his brachas. Let us all hope that very soon, before Gimel Tammuz, should be already Vekitzu Veranenu Sheikh Neofer, should be the real simcha with this galus of the Rebbe. Thank you.
I remember before we got married, it was already after Chavzayin others. We got married. So we went in before the groepen to put on the kittel and the Rebbe's kapote. En I asked the Shver, was tracht achos unter der groep? And he broke down. I said, Zalman, tracht wegen Rebbe. Dat was called my Yoni.
He was a Talmud of Rebbe. He was always say the Rebbe wanted this, Rebbe wanted that. He always worked for the Rebbe. What Rebbe wanted, he did it.
And Rabbi Moshe would ask us, what would the Rebbe say about this? And he was constantly worried about the Rebbe and how the Rebbe would look at the various different parts of the kinnus. So that was his question forever about every single part of the kinnus. How would the Rebbe look at this?
When it came time for us to get engaged, so obviously we had to write to the Rebbe. And we couldn't write to the Rebbe yet because Rebbe Kotlarsky was busy setting up a shliach in the States. So we waited for him to come back in order to write into the Rebbe. So obviously I learned at that moment that it's all about the Rebbe.
Moshe didn't hesitate. If there was a need for a shliach, he pained over it. I spent hours talking to him on these things, and I would say, Moshe, okay, so you're doing what you can. No, it's not enough.
He didn't only help shluchim, he helped meisdas. He helped people who were doing good things. He represented the Rebbe, so they knew that Lubavitch was helping them. The Rebbe was helping them. It became evident that he was the Rebbe's man.
Moshe sort of staked out a particular path that he would have the rest of his life. And even as a youngster, Moshe was a presence. He wasn't just another boy sitting there. Moshe was Moshe. There was somebody there. You acknowledged it. You were aware of it.
I thought about what would enhance Yiktzat Tefillah. And we decided we would make buttons. And we designed these yellow buttons on which it was written, Baruch Hashem, I put on film today did you. We did it, and we sent it into the Rebbe. The Rebbe was extremely pleased with this. And in fact, he paid for it.
In the old days, it was not such minhag to make loudspeakers in the weddings, in the chuppahs. One day when Moshe got married, he came over to me asking, maybe you can make me a microphone. The Rebbe sitting inside his room, and I want the Rebbe to hear the chuppah, the Kedushin. The Rebbe will be participating, be part of, and if the Rebbe doesn't hear it, I know the Rebbe is here, everything's fine, but I want the Rebbe to hear the Kedushin.
Moshe was a dugma chaya. You could live in Crown Heights, and your home could be a Beis Chabad. Friday night, there was always a full table. They came in as tourists. They left as people who had experienced a real Shabbos.
We were once sitting at a Seder, and no one else was with them. So someone asked them, what's with the rest of the family? Why aren't they with you at the Seder? And without missing a beat, this verse said, when they are all over the world doing what the Rebbe wants, that's how we're together as a family by the Seder. And he didn't just say it, he meant it. Family was everything to him. But the shlichus was as or more important.
I was zeicher to be the beginning of the South American small community Shloshim, which was Rabbi Moshe's initial mission that the Rebbe gave him, to come to South America and start organizing shlichus here. He was just about 30 years old in Tafshin Mem, Rivka even younger, and they impressed us. They impressed upon us the importance of doing our shlichus, the importance of being Gedem Anachas Ruach to the Rebbe, and I think more than anything, he impressed us with his Kabbalah Sale. We have to do what the Rebbe wants, and we have to get the mission done and give the Rebbe Nachas. He used to repeat very, very often that if there are 9,999 Jews in your city and you reach 9,998 of them, you have not fulfilled the shlichus. You did great things, you accomplished a lot, but the shlichus you have not done. You have to reach each and every single Jew.
He didn't see the fact that there was a few hundred families spread out over a large area shouldn't be considered as not being important. He wanted every single one of them to be catered to.
I could tell you, as much as he traveled and he was busy, if I was driving to visit my parents in Montreal, he'd call me and say, where are you up to? How's the drive? In the middle of everything, how's the drive? Big Rabbi Kotlarsky felt even bigger when he called his child to make sure that he was doing okay. And that was not only me, it was every shliach. When we were celebrating 20 years of Chabad in the 5 towns, I asked the Shver if he could be guest of honor. We felt that he was always there with us and for us. He helped us buy our Chabad house. He got us some funds. And in general, he was just involved every day in our daily life. He looked me in the eyes and said to me, Zalman, I don't sleep 9 out of 12 months a year in strange beds to be honored. And that was the end.
Rebbe Moshe cared deeply about shluchim. He always brought chocolate for the children of the shluchim. It happened once that we were in Seattle, and he spent all Shabbos with me, and he mentioned several times that he has chocolate for me to take with me. As it turns out, he forgot to give me the chocolate. And when I was leaving, I was going to the airport already. I was in the car. We noticed that Rebbe Moshe is chasing us. I told him, stop the car. Rebbe Moshe is chasing us. He came to the window. He said, I forgot to give you the chocolate. Make sure to take the chocolate for your wife and for your kids. It was such a touching moment. And there were many, many such moments like that, where Rebbe Moshe literally put himself out. He chased us to give me the chocolate. And that was typical of him.
And the children always had the feeling that the Rebbe sent his shliach to bring them candies. And they grew up with this love to the Rebbe Shloshim and to the Rebbe. And it's something that will always be thankful to Moshe for instilling that feeling in the children from day number one.
Good evening and welcome to the banquet of the Grand Kinnis HaShluchim HaElami, to the World Kinnis of the Shluchim of the Lubavitcher Rebbe Shlita, the most special and monumental convention of Shluchim which ever took place. Welcome to the Kinnis HaShluchim Tafshin Ayin Gimel 2012.
Moshe always wanted that every single year there should be some sort of an inyan of chiddush in the kinnis. It's very, very hard to reproduce excellence. Every kinnis is a phenomenal kinnis, and we always say, how can we improve on it? And it's really very, very difficult. But Moshe would come up with ideas, or he'd challenge the Vad to come up with ideas maybe 3-4 weeks before Moshe passed away. He was not well at that time. The meeting was held in his house, so he shouldn't have to travel anywhere for the meeting. And he sat practically the whole day. The meeting was from 10 o'clock in the morning till about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And Rabbi Moshe was there, and the occasions where he did speak, it was with Chochmah.
The Rebbe was very concerned about us, but nobody else was. Very few people outside of the Rebbe were very concerned. But Rabbi Moshe kept it in mind the whole time. To his credit, that he changed shlichus and he changed the Kiddush HaShluchim from being something that was not necessary to the center of Yiddishkeit. And he said that Yiddishkeit is dependent on us. I miss Rabbi Moshe dearly. It's very painful. It's very hard for me to go on and to continue without the Rabbi Moshe. Rabbi Moshe was completely the Rebbe's man, and he stuck to it all the time. He had a vision, and it was the Rebbe's vision. He saw throughout the entire time that the kinnis has to grow, and therefore he raised the money. He did everything that was necessary in order to make the kinnis HaShluchim grow.
He is the showcase of what an individual can do if he gives himself over to the Rebbe. That his whole personality becomes magnified, becomes an amplifier for what the Rebbe wants.
There were many Chalukas Mishnayos split throughout the world, and as my father requested, from the Shluchim, from Anash to daven and learn for him, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the thousands of individuals who have learned from my father, who will learn from my father, for Zecher Nishmasei, and it be Aliyah for the Neshama. As I was preparing for tonight's Siyum, completion of the entire Mishnayos, I was thinking, was there any Mishnah which really speaks about my father or something that was special to him? And I remember that there was a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, Perek Beis, Mishnah Tes, that my father used to use as a litmus test to see what type of a person anyone was when he had to speak about someone. The Mishnah starts off, Chamisha Talmidim Hayu Lei Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. There were 5 students that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had. What's a student? A student is a person who, wherever you go in the world, you could look at him and see that this is a true representative of their Rebbe. There are 5 types of representations that you could have as traveling to show that you are a Talmud of the Rebbe. Hu hayamein shvacham. He would say their unique qualities of these 5 individuals, in which way they stood out as shluchim of their Rebbe. The first one was Rebbe Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. His quality was Ber Seid She'eina Me'apeh Tipa, a plastered cistern that does not lose a drop. All of the minus, all of the private, hundreds of minus that my father had, the private audiences, all the sichos that the Rebbe said by Farbrengens, he tried not to lose a single one of them. As he woke up in the morning, that's what was in his mind. If he's representing, he has to go forward with every single tool that he was given. The second one was Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, Ashrei Yeladetei. We'll get back to him. The third one was Rabbi Yesi HaKayin, Chassid. You have to be a Chassid of the Rebbe. This one doesn't need too much explanation. The fourth one was Reb Shimon ben Nesanel, Yirei Chet, a person who feared sin. The Rebbe explains that the idea of Chet is from the word Chisaron, your fear of missing out something. If there was one line that my father constantly said in his life, not by speeches, just going about his day, it was constantly this idea of what would the Rebbe say. Any challenge he was brought to, any opportunity he came to, anytime we came to had an issue, what would the Rebbe say? He was always had that Yirei Chet, making sure not to miss anything that the Rebbe would want from him to do. And the fourth one is Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar ben Arach, Kemayan HaMiskaber. He's a wellspring, a spring that continues to gain force. My father went around the world to bring that force, the wealth springs of the Rebbe, the wealth springs of Chassidus, the Mayanis Chutza, to build and to make it bigger, that it's miskaber, to strengthen throughout the world, to bring people, to teach people about the Rebbe, to bring people to the Rebbe, to introduce people about the Rebbe wherever he went to. These 4 concepts speak about the person, but we skipped one. Rabbi Shimon ben Chananya, he said Ashrei Yeladetei. That's not an attribute about the person. Praiseworthy is the one who brought him up. If you really want to represent your teacher, if you really want to go out and show and give all you have to bring your Rebbe to every corner of the world, you have to realize it's Ashrei Yeladetei. It's not about you. It's not what you bring to the table. Rather, it is the chinuch you got in your house about askashos of how to be connected to the Rebbe. The iber gegemenkeit, how to give yourself that you learned in yeshiva. And of course, the sichos, the farbrengens, the adracha that the Rebbe gave you. If you realize that everything you're doing is Ashrei Yeladetei, you are the ultimate representative. It's not you. You are the shliach. Shal Adam Kemesa, you are the person who represents the Rebbe where you are. And that brings us to the last Mishnah of Shas, of the Mishnayos. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, Asid HaKadosh Baruch Hu lahanchol chotzadik v'tzadik shleish meis v'asara ilamis. In the future, Hashem will inherit to every one of the tzaddikim 310 worlds. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, lahanchil oya vayesh, that he's going to inherit to those that loved him, yesh. Yesh is a numerical value of 310. Ve'etzrei sehem, and their coffers of mali, I will fill them. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta. Rabbi Shimon Chalafta says, "Lo imatza Kadosh Baruch Hu kli machzik brach Yisrael ela hashalim." That Hashem could not find any vessel that could contain all the brachas He wants to give us, only shalom. One of the things that the Rebbe put immense time, immense effort was to make shalom throughout the world. And my father's early years, as he went out to deal with disputes between shluchim, misunderstandings between community and shluchim, the Rebbe guided him how to make those, how to deal with the disputes, how to get how to make the peace. And in the later years, many times when my father was in places that you can't call near, far off places, he used to tell the stories of quite a few times that every single night when he was out there, at 5 to 12, he would get a phone call in his local time. He would answer the phone, and it was Rabbi Chadakov. And Rabbi Chadakov would tell him, Maisha, wash Negelwasser, put on your gartel, say brachas, I'm calling you back in 5 minutes. Which means that the Rebbe was going to be on the line. Every single night. My father said it after the first time it happened to him, he stopped going to sleep before 12 o'clock. Every single night, the Rebbe spent immense time to do what? To give the Kli Machzik bracha, to have that vessel that is full of the brachas and the keiches of the Rebbe and of the Eibishter, this bracha of Shalom. Shenemar, as the Pasuk says, Adonai Eiz Lama Yitin, Adonai Yevarich Es Ami Bashalim. Hashem gives strength to His nation, but Hashem blesses His nation through Shalom. Slik Lahu Nishlamu Shisha Tzidri Mishnah. Rabbi Chanan ben Akasha Emer Ratza Kadosh Baruch Hu L'Zakis Es Yisrael Lefichach Hir Balahem Teiru Mitzvah Shenemar Adonai Chafetz L'man Tzidka Yad Lo Teira V'Yadir. Yehei Eloheinu l'chein shlam harav v'china v'chista v'rachamim v'chayin arichin u'mezeinu revicho for kana mikadam avoin v'shmaya v'imru amen. Yehei shlam harav v'shmaya v'chayin tevim alinu v'achol yisrael v'imru amen. Eiseh shalom b'mreim avu yatsa shalom alinu v'achol yisrael v'imru amen.
The family came together at one of our most important meetings to discuss how to introduce the next speaker. There was a debate. Should he be introduced as a Ben Bayis, as somebody who spent time Shabbos after Shabbos, as a brother to my father, as an uncle to each and every one of us. And as time went on, it became clear that there won't be enough time tonight, as the event space is limited in how much time they gave us to be able to properly introduce the next speaker. And so we decided to just capture a moment from the past and allow it to introduce him.
I was once at a wedding a number of years ago where the best man got up to give a toast. And he said, I would like to pride myself that I am the best friend of tonight's chassan. But unfortunately, I can't, because everybody in this room is his best friend. I have never had the opportunity to introduce by the Kinnis HaShluchim someone who is really my best friend. There is a family that for the past 17 years, wherever they have gone to do business, together with opening their commercial enterprises, they opened a Beis Chabad. They brought Chabad to Colombia. They brought Chabad to Riga. They brought Chabad to Vilna. They are bringing Chabad now to Romania, to Bulgaria, to Samara. They built the shul now in Alma-Ata. They are involved in the shliachs going to Prague. And this individual and his father, may his father be well together with his mother and his grandmother, maybe they be Marach Yomim Vishonim, and be able to continue their great work for Klal Yisrael, is the best friend to many and to all of the shluchim. Aside from this, he is a shliach himself. For every Shabbos, notwithstanding all of his great commercial interests, he is the rabbi of the beginners minyan in KJ, which is known as Ramaz, which is one of the most posh shuls in New York, where all the big machers go there with bowler hats and high hats and tuxedos. And over there, he started a Chabad house, and incidentally, he's building now, very involved in building the Chabad house and the mikveh on the Upper East Side. I really don't know what to say about him, so I'll just leave it at that. I would like to introduce to you my best friend, and the best friend of many of the shluchim here, Mr. George Rohr. Georgie, to say a few words of greetings.
Thank you, Rabbi Kotlarsky. A few short days after Rabbi Kotlarsky was nifter, as I say these words, after Rabbi Kotlarsky was nifter, and stare at them on this paper, I still can't fathom the stark reality we now face. A few short days after his passing, I received a text message from Dr. Eli Rosen, cherished close friend of Rebbe Moshe's. Dr. Rosen's mind, heart, prodigious medical skill, and keen professional insight were guided by the Almighty in the thoughtful, loving care that he so unstintingly gave to Rebbe Moshe throughout the brave, long struggle against his illness. That text message read, in part, "Hello, George. This is Eli Rosen. I am sure you are hurting as I am. No Shiva for us. Call when you can." We spoke. It was a brief conversation. We lamented about there being no formal framework, no halacha for us as his friends to follow to help us deal with the big, aching void that Rebbe Moshe's passing had left us. A long silence passed between us on that call before we said goodbye. Our conversation left much more unsaid than said. When no words are possible, no words are necessary. I suppose, though, that this occasion is an opportunity to express the words that are possible about what we learned from a man who strove to achieve and succeeded to achieve the seemingly impossible. Am Yisrael has lost an extraordinary force, and I have lost a beloved partner and friend. I first met Rabbi Kotlarsky in 1979. I had recently graduated from business school and moved to New York. By then, Rabbi Kotlarsky, had already established a warm relationship with my father, Zichron Livracha. My father mentioned to him in passing that I had moved to New York, so naturally Rebbe Moshe asked my father for my phone number, wanting to invite me to Crown Heights for a Shabbos. My father hesitated. He said, "You know what, Rabbi Kotlarsky, I'll give George your number, and if he's interested, he'll call you." Rebbe Moshe was all of 30 years old at the time, already then working full throttle, 24/6, traveling the world as the Rebbe's trusted emissary to carry out the groundwork for establishing outposts of Yiddishkeit elsewhere, everywhere. He and Rebbetzin Rivka were already well along in building their big, beautiful family. I was 5 years younger, still single, and always up for an adventure. Shabbos in Crown Heights. Was I interested? Yes, I was. I called the number. Rebbe Moshe and Rivka invited me, and off I went to their warm, wide-open home for Shabbos. And in some sense, I have never left. That turned out to be the most expensive phone call I've ever made. And I don't regret it for a single moment. That Friday night, at 770 was the first time I was zoche to see the Rebbe, and then again at my first Farbrengen that Shabbos afternoon. Soon thereafter, I would become a frequent guest of the Kotlarskys for Shabbos and for Yom Tov, and thanks to those visits, I had the privilege of davening at 770, attending many a Farbrengen, playing with the little Kotlarsky children, enjoying Rebbe Moshe's marvelous sense of humor, his zest for life, and his stories about his travels, getting to know the extended family, making new friends, and seeing the world of Lubavitch open up before me. Among the many extraordinary visits was Rosh Hashanah 1981. At 770, Rabbi Kotlarsky got me a place to stand from where, with a lot of pushing, I could see the Rebbe throughout davening. And most especially during Tekiyas Shofar, which made a profound impression on me. And I'll never forget that powerful singing of Avinu Malkeinu, which shook the walls and the rafters and surely the heavens above. That memory moves me to this day. That was the beginning of a long friendship, throughout which we, Baruch Hashem, danced at each other's simchas and cried together during the sad times as well. That friendship soon blossomed into a partnership of well over 40 years that became one of the defining relationships of my life. From my very earliest encounters with Rebbe Moshe until my last visit to him at home a few days before he left this world, what struck me consistently was how clear it was that what drove him every day was fulfilling the Rebbe's wishes, as you've heard this evening. Giving the Rebbe nachas. This expressed itself most clearly in his dedication to the Rebbe's Shloshim. His foremost concern was always for them. His unwavering commitment to their support, his perpetual readiness to assist them. When a shaliach sought his guidance, he never hesitated to respond. As Chabad Shlichus expanded exponentially after Gimel Tammuz, that eagerness to help, that alacrity and focus remained steadfast. The need for his comforting presence, his wise counsel, and practical guidance only grew and grew, yet he consistently found a way to be there for the Shluchim, helping them serve Am Yisrael on the front lines. And all of it was in service of carrying out the Rebbe's wishes. A funny yet poignant moment in retrospect underscores this point. About 15 years ago, Rebbe Moshe and I were catching up by phone one Erev Shabbos. He had just come back from one of his whirlwind international trips, visiting 10 countries in 12 days or something like that, working with and helping the Shluchim in each place. He was sleep-deprived and physically exhausted. His voice was raspy, he was so tired, and he said to me, jokingly as it turned out, that he wished he'd been born a chassid of a certain different chassidus. I was shocked in disbelief. I said, "What? Why?" He answered, "Take a look at that other chassidus. It's so comfortable. They have such beautiful tishon with the Rebbe at their head. And they sing beautiful nigunim, and they dance, and it's so nice. And their Rebbe doesn't demand very much of them. And look at me. My Rebbe's not even here physically, and he keeps demanding and demanding and demanding, and it just doesn't stop." And he let out a tired krechts. And I asked him, "Would you have it any other way?" He paused and laughed quietly and said, "Absolutely not." And we see the proof of this not only in how he lived his own life, but in the way his and Rebbetzin Rivka's example inspired the lives of dedication to the Rebbe's vision that's being led by all their extraordinary children and their families, bli ayin hara. No matter the circumstances, whether before or after Gimel Tammuz, whether before or after he was diagnosed with a devastating illness, it didn't matter. Accomplishing what the Rebbe wanted was what drove Rebbe Moshe day and night. And it was this motivation that enabled him to play his catalytic role in the stunning growth of the network of Shluchim and in the launch and development of so many breathtakingly successful programs to levels that nobody would have dared imagine years ago. All of us have so much to learn from Rebbe Moshe. The importance of setting a single, clear, highest priority to inform every aspect of our lives. The value of never being satisfied, of never resting on one's laurels, of dreaming big, of always striving for more, for stronger, for better. The value of an iron tenacity to see projects through despite all challenges, and of doing so with an unceasing simchas achayim, and with a smile. And beyond all of those, there's so much to learn from his menschlichkeit. I know many of us were privileged to see it firsthand in different ways, but since his passing, so many stories have surfaced from all over the world that family and close friends had never heard about how throughout his life he lifted up others of all ages through his generosity in word and in deed throughout the world, quietly and naturally being a bal achrayus and changing their lives for the better. His life was a testament to the power of commitment, to the fulfillment of a higher purpose. Let us take to heart the clarity with which Rebbe Moshe pursued the Rebbe's mission, the tireless devotion he showed to his fellow shluchim, and his boundless kindness that touched thousands of lives. As we mark his Shloshim, let us honor his memory not just in words, but in action. Let us, each of us and all of us, renew our commitment to fulfill the Rebbe's vision, just as Rebbe Moshe did every day until the end of his life. Thank you.
Herschel Kotlarsky passed away. Yud Aleph Kislev Tovshin Samachtas. It was a week or a week and a half after Gabi and Rivki Holtzberg were murdered in Mumbai, together with the Kedoshim and the Chabadas of Mumbai. Rosh Chodesh Kislev Tovshin Samachtas. I came to Menachem Ovel, and I was just sitting there. It was just a few people. It was one afternoon, and at some point he starts sobbing uncontrollably. Now, his father, who I think was 91, it's always a tragedy to lose a father. He was close to a father, but he was sobbing uncontrollably, sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. I was sitting there and watching, and then he finally opened his mouth, and he says, "My father was 91, and around his bed, he had children, grandchildren, watching him give his soul back to Hashem. He died surrounded with love, with family, with nigunim, with warmth. That's how he died. And how did Gabi and Rifki die? And he was just sobbing uncontrollably. It's almost like at that moment, I could see that he felt the visceral pain of almost like a mother.
Moshe cared about other people. Moshe cared about people, cared about Shluchim, cared about everybody. I once went through a very difficult personal issue. I didn't think that there was anything he could do to help me, so I consciously didn't want him even to know. Actually, when he heard about it, he was offended. Personally offended. So I said, Rabbi Moshe, what could you have done? Like, I didn't have any secrets from you. I was always very open with him. I don't have any secrets. He says, well, how could you not tell me? I had to hear from somebody else. He was offended.
What made him so special to us was his actual human care for each person. A Yid, a Chassid, who cared about his fellow Chassidim and overseeing Chabad houses and caring about every shliach.
Like probably a lot of kids all over the world, have this personal feeling of loss. You know, he used to show up with chocolates, he used to show up as somebody who cared. Traveling the world, somebody who cared, he knew their names, he knew when they were here for studying, whatever, he would insist they have to come and eat a meal, and why don't we see you more often? He really, shows them that he cares. And this, I've heard this from so many, but it's incredible.
So just before Pesach, I call him up because we brought another shliach a few months ago, and since Rabbi Kotlarsky is my head shliach, I had to consult with him. I needed his blessing. He called me up. It was the middle of the night in Taiwan, and I told him, what I need from him. Then he said, "Don't you need money for Pesach?" And I said, "I wasn't planning on asking." He said, "Send an email and ask for money for Pesach." I didn't even ask for it. He initiated that, and I know many, many other shluchim that he was really on top of their financials, even better than them themselves.
He touched people in their personal life. That's why people felt that he is their best friend. How can you have so many best friends? It's a good question. How can you have so many people that feel that you're mamish close to them? I have a connection with Rabbi Kotlarsky.
The day before my wedding, I was alone. I had an apartment on Union Street, corner Albany. My parents hadn't come yet for the wedding, or they were coming that night, or with my sister in Manhattan. And I was by myself. Like, when I say by myself, I was alone. Nobody invited me to dinner, I didn't have any roommates. And then I got a call. Rebbe Kotlarsky called me. He says, just confirming that I'm coming to the wedding, I'm gonna be there tomorrow. And then he started talking to me. He kept me on the phone, it must have been 45 minutes. How you doing? What are you doing with this? What are you doing with that? Every silly questions, important questions, everything like that. And I said to him, I said, don't you have other things to do? He says, no, I'm making time for you. It's very important. I know the night before a wedding can be, stressful. And he didn't know I was alone, and he didn't know nobody else called. And that phone call really meant a lot to me because, I'm not so important that he should remember. I was flattered enough he was coming to the wedding. I was flattered enough he's going to get a bracha under the chuppah, and then he was going to end up being Masada Kedushin. But that call was just something extraordinary to me because, he remembered it.
I was a young child. They sent me to Gan Yisrael in Liberty. A 9-year-old kid from Tennessee, first name Ivan. And I didn't like it there, probably because I was 9 years old. And Rabbi Moshe came and got me to the airport, took me home. And as a consolation prize, I remember he said, I'm going to take you to a Farbrengen. He knew that I didn't have a good experience, and he wanted me to be left with something positive and something that a little kid could appreciate.
Always nudge me about tzitzis, every time. He said, Kobe, make sure you start wearing tzitzis. And always, every single time also. Kobe put on tefillin, every yontiv also as well, Kobe. You gotta get the shul on time to say the Hot Tehillim, it was Shabbos Varchim or something, or Shavuos also as well. Yeah, you gotta make sure you read Tikkun, Leil Shavuos. Rabbi, I don't know, it's not my thing. I'm figuring it out, Rabbi. No, you gotta go do it.
The sudas were quite large. There weren't 4 people. Big table. The personal touch he had for every person there, when you were talking to him, was focused on you. He was talking to you. Moshe, how's this? How's this going? A year and a half ago about what's doing with that.
Moshe, defined by the mission. Sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes your ideas define your mission, and your mission becomes a reflection of your personality. I would say with Rabbi Moshe Kotloarsky was the opposite. It was the mission that made the man. He took the mission so seriously, it literally gave him wings and made him much greater than he could have ever become on his own.
I remember in the lead up to the Kenneth, he asked me to look at this speech. I don't think I've ever cleared my speech before with anybody. He was the first person to ask me. And I asked him, why do you care about this so much? He said, well, the first thing I want to make sure is you're not saying anything about me. I want you to take that out. The other thing is I want to make sure that we're focused on the mission of the Shluchim, what they do in their communities, how they help the Jewish community, how they influence the world. Just focus on the mission of the Shluchim if you don't mind. And I said, that's such an honest and profound message. And he was 100% right. Incredibly focused on the mission.
The mission defined him. It defined his mind, his heart, his personality. Who could really grasp the depth of the Rebbe's vision? Almost nobody. Moshe Kotloarsky didn't grasp it. He just extended his arm. And you know what? He facilitated it. He did it.
How he was able, forget the confidence to walk in this, but then the actual ability to execute on it over and over and over. Because the Rebbe's ideas, but someone has to go execute the ideas. And I can't think of somebody who executed for the Jewish people like Rabbi Kotlarsky did.
Gimel Tammuz Tov Shin and Dalet, obviously, it shook up the whole Lubavitch. But at that moment, something went into his heart, something went into his soul, something remarkable. He made it his motto and his mission to be able to take the Rebbe's Avodah and not just expand it, but really was ambitious to transform the world with it.
One of the key trademarks was my father's Hakaras HaTov to anyone and everyone, beginning from his yearning desire when his doctors would hardly let him move in bed, let alone out of bed, but to be able to go back to the oil one last time to say thank you and to continue to daven. The way he appreciated the Shloshim, the opportunities, the menuyim that the Rebbe gave him. Each and every shliach coming to their makom hashlichus and being a part of it was very special to him. And therefore, I'd like to just take a moment over here, and I'm sure I'm going to miss out some people, but I would be remiss if we didn't carve out a moment. I'm going to do a l'chaim. In certain Hasidus, and as we heard, those Hasidus and the food and the l'chaim is more important than the Torah learning and the speeches. And if I'm not mistaken, I remember the reason for that story because there was a dance with a very special individual who's part of the thank yous that he would have liked to have danced next to. But I want to take a moment to first say thank you to Dr. Rosen, as we heard. Yoimam V'Layla, he was there for my father in an incredible way. V'derech HaTeva, what my father had no cure, and most people don't see 3 to 6 months in, let alone 3.5 years of daily activity till the last moment. And in large part, it's the care and the dedication of the bracha of Yerapa Yerapa through the doctors, Hatzalah of Crown Heights. His words would not do justice to every single one of the members of Hatzalah, especially those that we're there on a daily, hourly, sometimes even minute-to-minute basis. Menachem Friedman, Yankel Volshansky, Zev Nelkin, David Katz, Hanan Feldman, and forgive me, all of the rest of you, really incredible. To the Shluchim of the Upper East Side that time and again brought their communities to make minyanim for him, to visit him on Shabbosim, to visit him, to Rabbi Shali Freundlach, who does incredible work, to all of his friends, to the Kehillah that was there for him in the last few years, that he was able to have that human touch inside, all of the shluchim that came by for Shabbosim, for the Kiddushim, for the Farbrengens, for a Matzah Shabbos Malav Malka, for a midweek conversation. So many of you in the room I see from all over the world. He really cherished those interactions and those moments and those phone calls. To the donors, he never really considered people donors. He wasn't a fundraiser. He didn't have a secretary. He definitely didn't have a development office. So anybody who had the schus to be a part of his work was because he saw you as a partner, as a shliach, as someone who the Rebbe tapped to be able to enable so much good around the world. So to each of you that are here, that are watching, some of you Nebuch are in Golis on July 4th, and you have to be in different, different parts of the world, that the sun is not as hot as over here, and the beaches are, not as rough as New York. So you're watching, and we're thinking about you, and we love you. But especially to those that did make the effort to come over here, and those that came from out of the state and out of the country, it means a lot. So I'd like to say l'chaim, that for everyone we should continue to be able to be inspired by him, to make sure that his work that the Rebbe entrusted him with in caring for every shliach, for every yid, for everyone everywhere should continue. L'chaim, l'chaim. In continuing in this line of Akaras HaToiv, really so many of you are included in that, but somebody who has been at my father's side in many different ways, in many different times, and got an honorary position like many others, but in his own very special way, to be part of our extended family. He would get calls. He was called upon to help in many different ways, and especially over the years and the things that the minuyim and the things that my Rebbe gave my father, whether it was to be joined the Vada Kinnis and to work side by side with him, whether it was to deal, settling certain issues between shluchim, and he learned, I was there together, we learned so much from my father's hadracha from the Rebbe, but also his pikchus and his common sense, and most importantly, by building a world-class institution as a achlata of the Kinnis HaShluchim that my father was so proud of, to build the Rohr Jewish Learning Institute in a world-class professionalism. And my father got a special kick out of showing the promo videos to different Balabatim, the Menendez brothers, whoever got to see the different beyond the letter of the law courses and stuff like that. But it really reminds me of the early days when there were really very little moisdus in Lubavitch. Thinking back, I always marvel at the pre-Gimel Tammuz. Lubavitch was Rabbi Chadikov, Rabbi Nissen Mendel. There is maskiris to keep up with the Rebbe's daily schedule, each one in their own way, whether it was writing letters, whether it was running the administrative side of the organization, whether it was keeping in touch with the Israeli social elite and politicians. There was Rabbi Levin in the library, and there was one Isha America's Leon Chinuch, the way he was introduced. And as I always, later it dawned on me, every time I would get a phone call, he was being introduced by a chuppah or a dinner, he said, "Your father told us to call you and tell us how to introduce him." I'm like, he knows his titles. And I realized he'd never connected with his titles because the titles were all post-Gimel Tammuz inventions. It didn't exist pre-Gimel Tammuz. There were no institutions, organizations, chairmans. There was a Rebbe and Chassidim. And it's something that became so clear to me that, especially watching the layers peel off as he had no koyach to deal with the nonsense, he cared about, he wished us, each and every one of us, to be Chassidim, Mekusharim, and give the Rebbe Nachas. That was all that mattered to him. And therefore, as the Moistus started growing from the Shluchim office, before that even dedications for Kahas, he would travel around and bring back those. It was a Moistus. Moving on to the different Achlatas Akinis that created the JLI and Chabad on campus and C-Kids and CT and a slew of other Moistus, even bringing money to Lahak when they needed for this farm to publish and to publish the Tanya with the Rabbeim's Pirushim on it. So to represent that side of the Moistus institution is my honor and privilege to call Rabbi Ephraim Shmuel Mintz to please share a few words.
Thank you, Mendy. L'chaim, l'chaim. Man noimar u'man edaber. Tonight's event was really meant to be a Sudas Haidah. You know, those of us who worked with Rabbi Moshe had the schus to work with him in preparing his speeches, and he was so looking forward to deliver his speech at the Sudas Haidah, recovering from his illness and celebrating that simcha with fellow Chassidim, Anash, and Shluchim. Unfortunately, there was a bit of a detour. The day will come, we will have a Sudas Haidah, but until then, there's a bit of a change in plans. And we gather here tonight, as was heard by so many in person and on video. And I was reminded by a story I once heard from a Yechidus where the Rebbe was addressing a mashpia who told the Rebbe that he had a very difficult time farbrengen for his Talmidim, for his community. And the Rebbe suggested that when you farbreng, do not only share stories of the Rabbeim, of Tzadikim, but make a point to share stories of ordinary Chassidim, of grace Chassidim, describing how ordinary people, ordinary Chassidim, can live extraordinary lives. Rabbi Yisai, tonight, we gather to honor, to salute, to celebrate, and to learn from the life of a very ordinary person, a very ordinary chassid who developed extraordinary character traits that left the world with a roll call of extraordinary achievements. All of us knew Rabbi Moshe to be an Amcha Yid. He was a regular Yid. He wasn't a Beinani from Tanya. He didn't consider himself to be Itche the Masmid or Rab Nissen Emenov or the Chassidim from Amol. He is Betoich Ami Anoichi Yeshevas. He was able to speak to any bacher, any child, any person, Jew or lahavdil non-Jew, and be able to have a rapport, a conversation, a yachas, a relationship. And yet, this very ordinary person, this very ordinary chassid that lived among us was truly an extraordinary person because he rose and he developed extraordinary methods and midos that truly lifted him and elevated him to be the Rabbi Moshe that we all came to love, admire, and respect. The Medrash says It's a fascinating medrash that there are two people in the Torah who are described one way in the beginning of their lives and in a very radical, different way at the end of their lives. One, says the Medrash, was Noach. Noach begins his life, the only person in the Torah who is referred to as a tzaddik. Noach ish tzaddik. And yet, as we know, at the end of Noach's life, he is described as a ish adoma. By contrast, Moshe Rabbeinu begins his life. The Torah describes him as a ish mitzri. And when Moshe Rabbeinu concludes his life, he is described as a ish Elokim. Says the Or Sameach in his Sefer Meshech Chochma Amorid Kevort. Why was Noach a ish tzaddik and suddenly he slipped into becoming a ish adoma? Because Noach started his life off as a tzaddik, and in many ways he was a tzaddik. But his primary focus was on his own personal growth, on his own personal avodas Hashem. And he climbed very high in that personal ladder in his pursuit of furthering his own personal avodas Hashem. Yet, says the Meshech Chochma, when a person focuses primarily on self, werd von a ish tzaddik, werd a ish adoma. Noach, Moshe Rabbeinu, by contrast, starts his life off as an ish mitzri. But as we know, Moshe Rabbeinu was kol kuloi. From the very beginning of his life, where the Torah describes him, Vayetze el echa vayar b'sivloisam, to the revolutionary statement, Mechenina misifrecha, his entire being was there for others. Von einem Mensch, was ist im Ganzen übergegeben zu Klal Yisrael, wird von a ish mitzri, a ish Elokim. We, in our lives, witnessed an ordinary person, a ish adama like all of us. Yet, because he was connected, as we heard tonight, time and again from speaker after speaker, because er sich aufgehoben, and he truly connected himself al kol tzad v'shal with what the Rebbe wanted of him, he was connected to Aish Elokim. He became the Kimoisoi. He truly became from Ish Adama connected to the Rebbe, and that Dveikus and his kashrus put him on the pedestal that he was and lived. In preparing for tonight, I was looking for a word that what was so unique about Rabbi Moshe. And the word that came to me was a word that only appears in the Yiddish language. Modern Hebrew kind of took the word and made something of it as well. The word in Yiddish simply stated as farginen. Farginen. In modern Hebrew, lefargen, taken from the Yiddish. What's pshat farginen? It's so uncommon, there's no word in English or other languages, because it's uncommon in language and uncommon in society and culture. Farginen means to celebrate, to relish, to rejoice, and to take full satisfaction and simcha in the hatzlacha of someone else other than yourself. Rabbi Say, we witnessed this, those who worked around him, and those, the shluchim that he communicated with, and there were so many, we witnessed it time and again and again. The extraordinary midah of farginen, in power, to celebrate the success of others. And there's another medrash, also a Gemara, that tells us, why was it that the Urim V'Tumim, the Urim V'Tumim was the conduit, the vehicle that conveyed the voice of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Klal Yisrael and to the world. The Pasuk tells us, where should the Urim V'Tumim be placed? V'nosata el choshna mishpat, and v'nosata v'hoyu aleiv Aharon b'voyu lifnei Hashem. It should be placed on Aaron's heart. Rabbi says a medrash that says, Omer Rab Shimon ben Yochai. Why was it that Aaron HaKohen was zoicha, that on his heart sat the Urim V'Tumim, zog the Medrash Hazoi, Leiv shesamach b'simchas chaveiroi. A heart that can rejoice in the simcha of someone else. Which simcha? When Aaron's younger brother was appointed to greatness, Moshe Rabbeinu, the Torah tells us, V'racha v'samach b'liboy. A heart that can celebrate and rejoice in the success and growth of someone else. As our hearts, Yilbash Urim V'Tumim. And this medrash came to me when I was thinking to myself years ago, Rabbi Moshe, I was once sitting with Rabbi Moshe in his office one night, and he found a pekel of tzetlach, letters from the Rebbe, letters to and from the Rebbe, letters that the Rebbe received, and the Rebbe sent out to him, Rabbi Chadokov sent out to him, Maskiris, and he was reminiscing and telling me some of the stories from the Yemei Bereshis of his work in Merkez. And at one point, I looked at Rabbi Moshe, looking at some of the letters that was sent out, and he was dispatched to take here to address. I asked Rabbi Moshe, how old were you? As was mentioned earlier by one of the Shloshim. He was in his low to mid-30s. The Rebbe had gesehen in them our hearts at a very young age, a heart that's able to celebrate, to faginen, and to truly take pride in the success of others. You know, the Rambam in Hilchos Deis, when he describes Avas Yisrael, mitzvah lehoiv kol echad mi Yisrael kigufoi, what does the Rambam say? One word. L'saper b'shivchoi. L'saper b'shivchoi. Pasha, to talk favorably at another Yid. One of the Shluchim, I think it was Mendy, mentioned the many letters he would write to the Rebbe, the reports, Levi mentioned. I saw many of those reports Rabbi Moshe shared with me. And I noticed that when the Rebbe would dispatch, when the Rebbe would send Rabbi Moshe to a city, he would always report mit barditsche ve'oigen. He would always find something positive to write about the shliach, the Chabad house, the shul, the building, the mikveh, the children. Derech agav. L'saper b'shivchoi. As our hearts is worthy of carrying, of facilitating shlichus as we know it today, with the tremendous chusim that he had. This was something that we witnessed all the time, but there was one night that comes to mind. About 2.5 years ago, I drove with Rabbi Moshe to Pennsylvania, and on the way back, we got onto the turnpike, driving back to New York. It was about 7 o'clock in the evening. And there was a major storm and major flooding on the New Jersey Turnpike. And we ended up at a standstill on the turnpike from 7 in the evening until 6 o'clock the next morning. How many of you fabrang the whole night with Rabbi Moshe on the turnpike? I'm not sure if any of his children had that schus. So this is what happened. Let me share with you what happened. First, we finished a shiurim, Rambam, Chitas. Then we listened to a fabrengen. Then about 1 o'clock in the morning, maybe a little earlier, something fascinating. I witnessed something extraordinary. You see, he knew time zones of every single place in the world. So we were sitting stuck on the turnpike, but his mind was racing. And you would think it was 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. He started to call, and he was returning phone calls. There was a wedding that he wanted to wish the Chas and Kala. There was an issue with a shliach, with a board. There was a problem with a mikveh in Europe, Eretz Yisrael, Australia, South Africa. Literally non-stop. He was pashut, he was given, as he slept after a whole night without sleeping. 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. He was literally on the phone non-stop. And I was his secretary helping call other people that he needed to follow up on some of the phone calls. It was truly extraordinary to witness this firsthand. A year ago, about this time, in Tammuz Tafshin Pei Gimel, I was sitting with him, and we were planning a trip. It wasn't easy. He was really not well, as you know. and we had planned a trip. It was a small trip to visit some Balabatim. And then he calls me and he says, I'm going to have to cancel the trip and postpone it for a week or two later. What happened? There was a shlucha, an almana from Europe, that called him and said that I'm going next week with my daughter to the oil. She's becoming a kala. And Rabbi Moshe, I'm asking you if you could please accompany us as we go to the oil. Rabbi Moshe, of course, readily agreed, and he postponed the trip. That was not something I was surprised by, because I've seen that happen all the time. What I was so surprised and taken by was that this shlucha, this almana, who in the world, who in Lubavitch did she feel she wanted to call to be that fatherly figure, to accompany her and her daughter on this most important day in their life, becoming a kala, other than Rabbi Moshe? And you know, as I do, how many hundreds and many, many hundreds of Anash, Chassidim, Chabad or not, felt that personal connection, that fatherly figure, that leiv shesamach b'simchas chaveroi that we all experienced, which is why it is no surprise that 30 days ago from today, Kol Beis Lubavitch Yifku Es HaSreifa Asher Saraf Hashem. It wasn't just one machana, it wasn't one group of shluchim or anash or bachrim. It was the ganze Welt. On that day of Chav Zayin Iyar, the world was shaken by the passing of Rabbi Moshe. And that same individual care, that love that we witnessed day in and day out, continued ad yoimoy ha'achroin. Several days before he passed away, I was sitting with him. His matzav was really, really not good. And he turned to me and he said, Ephraim, put your wife on the phone. I want to speak to your wife. I called my wife, gave the phone to Rabbi Moshe, and Rabbi Moshe started to thank her. Thank you for, I've taken your husband away from the house so many times. I've called your house all hours of the day and night. Thank you. I'm giving brachas. My wife was crying, he was crying, and I was crying. And then he called my son Mendel. And then he went on to call shluchim. Some of them I see here. What I was amazed by, this was the last day he was able to fully communicate. What I was amazed by was that every shliach he called, he was going through Yisurim Noiroim. Every shliach he called. One shliach, he said, you should have B'suras Toivos with Shidduchim by your kids. The other shliach, he had gehalten kop. He lived with every single one of them, remembering what to say, how to say it, with that leiv shesamach b'simchas chaveroi. To conclude, Rabbi Isai, we're standing now, as was mentioned by others, Erev Gimel Tammuz, Shloshim Shana. In 24 hours, Klal Yisrael, Chassidim especially, will mark the unfathomable 30 years since Gimel Tammuz. Tonight we gather to Fabreng about a chassid who truly lived that life of hiskashrus, of avas Yisrael, of doing that which the Rebbe expects and asks of us. As he asked to write in his matzeva, Sho'af kol yomov ligrem nachas ruach ulevaser toivu b'hisofa. And that was a question that he asked time and again. Hundreds of times he would turn to me and say, what would the Rebbe say now? In a crisis, in an issue that was happening in this part of the world or that part, for the kinnus or for something related to JLI, for a problem, mediation, whatever it was, he would turn to me with his tmimus, with his earnest she'ifa to do the right thing. He would say, what would the Rebbe say? In fact, that question, 25 years ago, that question changed the path and the trajectory of my personal life and my wife, our family. I was sitting with him 25 years ago. I came to discuss with him a shlichus position we were exploring in New Jersey. My wife and I already went down to spend the Shabbos there, and I came to discuss the shlichus with Rabbi Moshe. He turned to me and he asked me about a little program we were running called JLI. And he asked me, how many students took courses with JLI in the last year and a half or 2 years? How many locations are you in? So I said, we're in about 30 cities, roughly 2 years, maybe 900 students. That was maybe a stretch. It wasn't that many students. So he said to me, imagine next year you can have another few hundred, and the year after that, another few hundred, and eventually 2,000, 5,000, 10,000. And then he turned to me and he asked the question that changed the path of our personal life. And he said, Ephraim, what would the Rebbe say? At that moment, my wife and I decided to make JLI our shlichus. And 25 years later, we just surpassed our 500,000th student. And it was all thanks to his earnest, trademark, clarifying question, what would the Rebbe say? As we stand Erev Gimel Tammuz, I'm reminded by a phone call I received by Rabbi Moshe several months ago. He said, Ephraim, please come over. We spoke every day, usually in the morning, at night, and sometimes, many times during the day. If for whatever reason we didn't speak, he would call me at night, sometimes late at night, 11, 12 at night, frantically, saying, I said, Moshe, is everything okay? He says, we haven't spoken all day. Is everything okay? But this time he asked me to come over to his house. And I did. And he was sitting with Mendy and some of Mendy's kids. And when Mendy and his children left, he closed the door and he turned to me and he said, my matzav is really not good. My numbers are looking very bad. I want to spend the last period of my life strengthening my hiskashus with the Rebbe. And I'm asking you, let's learn together the Rebbe's Torah. I learned the Rebbe's Torah for years and years, primarily to give it over in speeches and classes and talks. But I want to immerse myself in these last moments that I have to learn Torah's Rabbeinu, to strengthen my hiskashus with the Rebbe before I come to Olam HaEmes and meet the Rebbe. And so we spent time learning. The last time we learned was in the Hatzalah ambulance several days before he passed away on the way to the oil. Where he wrote a pan, and we learned a Sikha in Chelik Yudzayin about Ma Mikveh Metaris Hatmeim. He worked hard. He wanted to learn the Rebbe's Torah. He wanted to utilize every moment to strengthen his hiskashus. Rabbi Isai, there's no better way for us to prepare for Gimel Tammuz than to internalize the life and legacy of this chassid, who truly sha'af kol yamav. He personified what the Torah tells us, and the Rebbe explains that Kalev and Yeshua were different than the other Meraglim who were focused on their own personal avodah, which is why they wanted to remain in the Midbar. But Yeshua and Kalev, Ruach HaCheres Hoyo Imoy. They had a different mission, a different mandate. They were tasked with being Manhige Yisrael. Yeshua was meant to be the next Manig, and his focus was meant to be there for others. Rabbi said, the Rebbe concludes and he says, all of us, although we're not Yeshua, but we're connected to the Rebbe, and therefore, Ruach Acheres Banu. We have the tremendous chus and achrayus to rise above our ordinary selves and to be there for others. Mit our hearts was yismach besimchas chaveroi, with a heart that truly rejoices in the simcha of fellow chassidim and yidden. And there's no greater dugma chaya for the life and legacy he leaves us. Let us hope that we could be reunited b'korev. But until then, the achdus, the shalom, the simcha that we'll personify together as chassidim should be the greatest hachana, that b'korev mamish should be zoicha, that v'racha v'samach b'libeinu, to be reunited with the Rebbe and all Chassidim b'meheira v'yameinu mamash.
As we wind down, there's a very beautiful short ending. And then Emertz Hashem will daven Ma'ariv and have a beautiful Farbrengen led by all of the Shluchim that are here. Rabbi Cantor from Thailand, Rabbi Tachtel from Berlin, Rabbi Shapiro from Sydney. I see over here Shluchim from Bulgaria, from India. So from all over, we'll sit around and we'll get into Farbrengen to prepare us and to internalize these messages in Mirza Hashem. I'm going to introduce 2 short videos before the Achlata. And while we watch these videos, I'm not sure why, but we had this back and forth in the family to do a Sefer Torah, not do a Sefer Torah. My father was somebody that never, he said, if you have extra money, you send out another shliach. And I called the Sefer today. My father undertook to write 36 Sefer Torah, and then he wanted to do mezuzahs and tefillin, and then 100 Sefer Torah. He was playing around with the idea, but he didn't tell me about it. And he reminded me that we were once sitting together, and my father asked him about writing a Sefer Torah, l'refuah shlema, a specific type of Sefer Torah. And I said, you know what? Mirza Hashem will find a way to cover it, be mishtatif, but at the last minute, and I want to thank the Sefer, and while I'm thanking the Sefer, there's a lot of people who made tonight possible, and we're going to put the credits on the screen, but especially the hosts tonight, Beis Rivka, Rabbi Benny Wolf, Rabbi Goldstein, the Vad, who really went above and beyond to give us the space over here and allow such a beautiful Hachana for Gimel Tammuz and Shloshim event to come. These people, the one good thing about tonight is that there was only 2 weeks to prepare it. So you could put day and night in, but there's only so many hours in the day. And while we're reading the credits and thanking everybody, I would like to call up, Mirza Hashem, with time we'll have many more people to be able to take part in this, but some of my father's closest friends that flew in, some of the supporters, family members, and shluchim, to, while we're watching these videos, to come to the side. The Sefer's over here. So Rabbi Yitzchak Ganevish, his wife Julie, are extremely close friends. Yedid Nefesh, Rabbi Benjamin Philipson and his family, Rabbi Hillel Farkash, who we've celebrated many Sifrei Torah together, Reb Shlomo Kaduri, and I'd like to ask my brother-in-laws, or my brothers-in-law, I'm not sure how, brothers-in-law? My uncles, Rabbi Yossi Shem Tov, who's here from Tucson, whose wife, together with all of my father's sisters, taught us what it means to be family together with their brother. It's an incredible, I wish everybody over here to have family like we had. So, Shaya Ben Yaminson, Zalman Volovic, rabbis, Rabbi Greenberg, Rabbi Lane, and Shmuley Perlstein, who put a tremendous amount of effort in tonight. I'd like to ask a childhood friend and a neighbor representing one of the best neighbors, in addition to best families, but to have the best neighbor. I remember growing up, my father would say we were neighbors for 40 years. We never went to each other's house and we never fought. But every time we went to Eretz Yisrael, it could be for 12 hours. We had to stop off by Rabbi and Rebbetzin Bestritzky, Alav Shalom, and I see Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak is over here, and I'll ask him to come and write a letter together with Reb Shmuel Eisenberg and Yasim Chalashvili, and those that worked with my father, Reb Shlomi Pellis, who was there time, day and night, and Rabbi Yossi Gordon. I'm sure I'm missing people out, but these are representatives of all the different types and categories. And therefore, I'd like to ask the Shluchim, Yossi Solomon, Yisrael Kozlovsky, Yuri Tachtel, to please, while we're watching the next 2 videos, short videos, and we're going to hear the Achlata over here today, to come and to write letters. And Eretz Hashem, with time, the Kehillah and the friends and the members of the community and other shluchim will have, but at least there will be a Torah that will be included of all types of Lubavitchers and Yidden having a part in it. And in addition to all those that are watching and that are here, we made this public statement and we'll make it again, that my father did not give himself the freedom of leaving, go, and walking away from everything that he did in his life. He built and he supported with the Rebbe's brachas that he was the tziner for. And therefore, together with my uncle and together with the office and all of the moizdes and the staff, an incredible group of people that deserve a tremendous yasher koyach, each and every one of them for rolling up their sleeves and standing up to the plate. We're committed to continuing not only to sustain, but to grow and to make good on all of those achlatas from the after schools that we just launched, the first 30 of them, which is a revolutionary idea, to 100 new shluchim, to keeping the Simcha Fund going, to making sure that the last 60 mikvahs are going to be built, to making sure that the rest of the seating lounges are going to be done, and everything else that he committed to, but more importantly, Chabad today, world recognizes in the post-October 7th world that the Rebbe's approach is the only approach to creating proud Yidden around the world. And therefore, we will make sure together that we put together a fund, Lilu Nishmasei, that will not only sustain and grow, but will take the activities of Lubavitch to a whole new level by supporting shluchim and shlichis and growing shluchim and shlichis around the world, together with our partners and friends and together with their friends, until we can tip the scale and bring Mashiach. The last two videos, one is very short and I only remembered about it the last minute. I wasn't able to have the help of the professional organizations, and one day we'll do it. But as we were putting the night together, I remembered how watching the videos of my father going by the Rebbe, there were some very unique moments. 3 times after his mother passed away, the Rebbe gave him $1 during the Shloshim for Aliyas HaNeshama, which was very eerie to find that video right after my father passed away for Aliyas HaNeshama. But more importantly, how many times the Rebbe gave him $1 for Allah Shluchim, for Allah Shlichusin, for the Nesias, for the traveling, for the ganzen Kinnis. The one my father always would tell when he brought over Rabbi Ben Talila from Africa, he always said he raised all this money and he never took $1 commission until he saw the video when he tells the Rebbe, this is the Shlomo Ben Talila, he's going to Kinshasa, to Zaire, and the Rebbe gives him a second $1, and then he looks at my father and he smiles and he says, commission. So there are a lot of unique moments throughout the years that were special interactions, and we put together a small collage because it's a personal for the family and friends over here, followed by some memorable moments that will play on the screen while our friends start beginning the letters of the Sefer Torah.
By Hashem, I'm blessing you. You change a lot of people. Thank you. You not need to be changed as you change other people. It will be good health, have not.
There is nothing and no one and no such entity as a small Jew. You may find yourself one alone in your school. You may find yourself a minority. But remember, you are a big Jew. And you matter to Hashem. You matter to each other. And the way you will matter is if you will show everybody that you care for them. You are not the leaders of the future. You have the power and empowerment to be the leaders of the world today.
With my love for you, I will conclude with something that I heard from a Jew in Alabama who was in a non-kosher nursing home where he said, my children dumped me here and they don't even call me on Father's Day. And he said to me, Rebbe, what should I say? My father called it the Holy, Holy Shabbos. My grandfather called it the Holy, Holy Shabbos. My father called it the Holy Shabbat. I called it Shabbat. My son calls it Saturday. My grandchild calls it the weekend. It says I give a shiver when I think what my great-grandchild's going to call it. And they have a name for it. They call it the day before Super Bowl Sunday. It is the job of this Chabad house, as every Chabad house, to fulfill the Rebbe's mission that there shouldn't be one Jewish child that shouldn't know that there's a Shabbat.
We will not fight them with AK-47s. We will not fight them with grenades. We will not fight them with tanks. The Rebbe taught us a little candle in the room lights up the whole room. Such brutal darkness can only be fought by torches of goodness and kindness and light. If you are to ask anyone, the most powerful Jewish organization in the world are the Rebbe Shloshim, because in this room tonight, without exaggeration, represents the totality of world Jewry. A round of applause for the whole wide world.
So it is incumbent upon us to realize that while each second with the Rebbe is something that is very, very precious, that we should find in our hearts that which could be given to the Rebbe in writing, those requests for brachas, all those things which have to be asked that could possibly be done through a letter, we should leave it for that. All the brachas that the Rebbe will give, and the Rebbe is giving to us and to all of Klal Yisrael, will be fulfilled in their entirety, and that everyone will have a ksiman, a gemar ksiman teva. The Rebbe will be coming in shortly.
There will be no Darash meaning. We'll bring the Geula. Each and every one of us has to undertake to see and to do his part. I thank you in advance for that which you will do.
May the Almighty God shine His countenance upon each and every one of you. Grant each and every one of you all the blessings of peace, health, happiness, prosperity, true Yiddish nachas to and from all your loved ones.
And together we will march to Jerusalem with Mashiach Tzidkenu, with the Rebbe leading us to Mashiach Tzidkenu speedily in our days. Amen.
And now for the final piece. And after that, in Mirza Hashem, we'll ask the grandchildren, and if there's anybody, it's not an infinite amount of letters, but with time in Mirza Hashem there will, but the grandchildren really, day in, day out, he was very proud of his family, how much they gave to be with him, and we had very unique moments with him that each of the grandchildren know and remember. But please, in addition to the legacy projects and the big projects, and Mirza Hashem, the commitments to continuing and the partnerships that are going to flourish, there was one thing that was above all else extremely important. I also would like to ask the Mechatanim that are here, Rabbi Perlstein, the Rosh Hashiva of the Chicago, as well as Rabbi Hertz and whoever else, to, after this video, take a moment. Remember, we need 7 minyanim for Ma'ariv, and in the meantime, the Farbrengen is going to be set up, and we'll be able to Farbrengen to the night. So please bear with us as we have, Baruch Hashem, a whole night planned ahead.
My passion this year is that a Mashiach ben David ba'el et b'der shekulei zakai. This is a call to action, that there should be not one Jew that does not do a mitzvah this year. When I was not feeling well, I thought, what present could we give to the Rebbe? Our present to the Rebbe has to be to change the world into a world of kulei zakai. We can't be complacent with what is going on. It is so many years since Gimel Tammuz, so many years since Chav Zayin Adar. If you are a head of state, a head of country, a head of city, a head of a community, it is your obligation to see that each and every Jew, regardless where he is, says Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, gives a penny to tzedakah, does a mitzvah. If you take 10 people and say with them every day, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, give a penny to tzedakah, it's Avos Yisrael, it's the union of tzedakah. We could accumulate hundreds of millions of mitzvahs. And the Rebbe can tell the Almighty God it is 28 years already since Gimel Tammuz. And look, my shluchim, my chassidim, all of my chassidim, all of my shluchim, look what they're delivering me. Each and every one of us has to undertake to see and to do his part, that there is not one Jew in the world that is not going to do a mitzvah. Take hachlotas to make this a world of kulei zakai, so that we should be reunited with the Rebbe speedily in our days. Bebias Mashiach Tzidkenu b'mheira b'yameinu mamash.
I'm Mendy Tobin, and I'm a Shliach in Comac, New York. One Mitzvah is a crowd-raising platform, but instead of raising funds, you actually raise mitzvahs. It's very similar to the platforms that we're all familiar with, where we raise money, but this time, it's mitzvahs instead. I found One Mitzvah to be an amazing platform, and whether you're a Shliach or not, I think you will too. It's super easy for anyone to make their own campaign. The site is already preloaded with about 30 different campaigns for almost any life cycle event that you can think of. You log in, put in some basic info, and voila, you are ready to start collecting mitzvahs. Rabbi Moshe launched this platform, his final project, as a way to encourage all Yidden to add even one more mitzvah, which will ultimately hasten the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days. Amen.
Two years ago, unfortunately, the machla that ultimately took our father's life came back. Baruch Hashem, for a while we thought it was gone. And our father used to mention to us many, many times how he appreciated us all being together as a united family, coming together for the small simchas, the large simchas, and always being there together. And he sincerely enjoyed us being around him. I remember as a child, our table, as was mentioned earlier, on Friday nights was always a packed house, but the seats around him, he would always save for us, his children. And even as a bacher, 770, not always did I come home exactly at 12:30, but that seat still stayed there at 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and he would nudge me, you gotta come a little earlier. And he really prided himself with his children. And so the last few years, we made sure that 24/7, one of us were around our father, nonstop. And so it was one late night. I was sitting in his room next to him, and he turned to me saying, the final campaign that I'm starting to sturm about, talking about, the one mitzvah campaign, I feel like this is the reason why the machla returned, why the sickness came back. He said, because when Hashem will see that the world is a dar shekulei zakai, a world that is a generation that is incredibly good, Mashiach definitely will come. And he continued telling me, he said, this campaign, this is the campaign that will bring Mashiach. And the Satan doesn't want to let Mashiach to come. That conversation, it was etched in my mind for the past 2 years. I was hoping it wouldn't be true. I feel the responsibility to share the above story because this was truly his final push, his final desire. My dear friends, fellow Shloshim, Chassidim, and Yidden, tonight is the night. We stand together, preparing ourselves for Gimel Tammuz. My father would always mention, as this is our Rosh Hashanah Liskashrus, we have to make a achlata teva to finally tip the scale. As the Rebbe often quoted, the famous Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva. My father's final few days, unfortunately, it was very hard for him to talk. And Thursday night, it was the middle of the night, around 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Many shluchim perhaps remember receiving an email that time. We're standing in the room, we all came together singing nigunim, and in between a nigun, I took the guts to call in and I said, Tati, we're all here with you. What is it? Say something, give us a message. It took a few times to ask, but Baruch Hashem, he opened his eyes and he just called out and he said these 3 words. Chasidim mikusharim ibegegeben zum Rebbe. Those were his final words to us. And it took this scene played over 2 times, both Thursday night, Shabbos, and again on Sunday. But this truly was everything about him. His whole life, his whole desire was, what does the Rebbe want? We all know what the Rebbe wants. The Rebbe wants finally to bring Mashiach. We have to get the job done. My friends, this platform is one of the ways we could finally get the job done. It's a platform that's like none others. It doesn't cost a penny to start a campaign, and also when you finish, they won't take anything from you. And it's ready to go. Look in the back of the booklet that's on your chair. You scan that barcode. You go to this link. It's an easy to make a campaign. It's not about getting 1,000,000 mitzvahs tonight, but just like Shlichus started, the Rebbe opened 1 Chabad house, a second, a third. The same is true. We need to do 1 mitzvah, like my father just mentioned in the video. 1 phone call with 1 Shema, you could get 5, 6 mitzvahs. Avos Yisrael, Krishma. If you teach the person what you said, that's Talmud Torah. You can get so many mitzvahs. But it's more than that. It's not just about getting the mitzvahs of the people here in this room. We have to come up with creative ways how we could bring this platform to people in our communities. I'm a fellow shliach as well. I'm also guilty that I don't use it 100%. But we have to think of ways how the Amcha could use this platform, not just shluchim. The boy that's not religious, he could use it for his bar mitzvah and bar mitzvah project. The family that's going through a medical challenge, they could use it to encourage their friends to do a mitzvah. 5 mitzvahs, 10 mitzvahs, doesn't have to be 1,000,000 mitzvahs. We can make this happen, and we will make this happen. And 1 mitzvah here, 1 mitzvah there. And with that, we will tip the scale, and we will bring Mashiach. May it happen tonight. Amen.
Thank you, everybody. And I'm just going to finish and conclude with the story my father would tell many times of a little girl sitting in the first-class cabin on a plane next to a businessman, and all of a sudden the flight attendant comes on the loudspeaker and says, "We're about to hit turbulence like you haven't seen before. Fasten your seatbelts and brace yourselves for what's about to happen." And so, all of a sudden, they're hitting a weather storm, and the plane is thrown from side to side, 3,000-foot drops, up and down, and everybody's screaming and everybody's crying, and the girl is sitting there peacefully, quietly, coloring in her coloring book as if nothing ever happened. And after a little while, when the storm passes, this investment banker turns to this little girl and says, "Young lady, I noticed that when everyone was nervous, you were sitting here like nothing ever happened." And she looked at the man sitting next to her and she said, "My daddy is the pilot. He is the best pilot in the whole wide world, and he promised me he's taking me home." Chassidim, we're here today and we beseech the Eibishter. It's 30 years of Yater Mibchayei, of Shloshim doing their work, of Chassidim, of Chassidish Anash, of the world recognizing the Rebbe's impact, but yet we are not going to get used to the darkness. We are not going to be complacent. It's a weather storm, and we know that our Rebbe is taking us as he promised us. This is the last generation of Golus. There will be no Dar Shmini, but we would like it to be now, with the coming of Mashiach, Tzidkenu, B'mheiriv Yameinu, Mamish, L'chaim. We're going to have Ma'ariv, we're going to have a Farbrengen. Thank you to each and every one of you, those I got to personally say thank you to. There is actually a community that I have to mention. I forgot, I'll be honest, they were on my notes 3 times. They're not here with us, but they've done tremendous amount. The community, the Rebbe's community of the Nepe Petrovsk, Reb Shmuel Kamenetsky and his friends, together with all of the other key supporters that were there for the Shluchim around the world, time and again. I want to give them a bracha, min hametzer lamerchav, that they should be able to have all of the brachas to continue. And again, to thank each and every one of you. I see Shluchim from so many places. I see friends from so many places. People that sacrificed to be here and gave up. Thank you very much. We appreciate your support and friendship. And Amir Tzah Hashem, on upward and onward to the Gola Amitis V'Ashlema.